Welcome to What the Health? Where anything health is fair game, as we tackle the trends and bust the myths about health and wellness. Here are your hosts, Dr. Dan and Angela Toro.
And welcome to another What the Health podcast. I am Dr. Dan here with my co-host
Angela Toro with Toro Family Chiropractic. Got another great episode coming your way. First got to do the much needed disclaimer. As you guys know by this point, we are here for informational purposes only. I'm not giving any individualized medical advice. Please always talk to your trusted healthcare professional before making any changes to your particular lifestyle. So with that out of the way and being said, what are we talking about today, Dr. Dan?
So for all those innocent ears out there, we are going to be talking about the F and the C word today.
Oh, we got a good one today.
We got a good one today. We're talking about the F and the C word. We were talking about fat versus carbs, fat versus carbohydrates, and we get this all the time, should I eat more fat? Should I eat high carbohydrate? And these terms, it's just so funny because I had a little bit of a background in, we did some nutrition in our undergraduate, and, of course, through your biochemistry and nutrition, you learn about the term macros, right? And I didn't really hear that term until bodybuilding and training and stuff down the road. I'm like, what the heck are people talking about? And you got your fat, your carbohydrate, your proteins, and then again, alcohol is actually considered
the fourth nutrient.
A nutrient that can be broken down for energy, and those are your major nutrients that the big molecules that are just broken down for energy in the body. But there's been this big back and forth over the last probably decade now of fat coming back into the picture because it was really shunned for so many decades, especially here in the United States. So I'm sitting across here from Angela, and she's got this whole notebook of back and forth. So I'm going to let her speak a little bit about the history of why we've gotten to the point we're at, and hopefully I'll try and keep my interjections to a minimum. But yeah, really understanding do I eat more fats in my diet? Do I eat more carbohydrates in my diet? What is better? What is ultimately, how do we get healthy and stay healthy is the question we're all looking for. So without being said, what are your major bullet points over there, Angela, that you've got a whole notebook full of?
Well, I think anyone, growing up in America, especially during the time that we did, is very, very familiar with the low-fat craze. I know that is what we grew up with, the diet, the diet products, we had the lean pockets because hot pockets were unhealthy, but lean pockets were great for you as long, again, if there was no fat or low fat, it was perfectly acceptable in the household. Yeah. And I think a lot of people our age and that generation grew up in the same way. And it's really interesting when you look at, we don't have time to go into the entire history of how that happened, but it really was a combination of involvement, shocker, from the government, from lobbyists, and from the food industry. And like a lot of the things that we end up doing on a day-to-day basis, we are very influenced by marketing. So way back, a couple studies were starting to show that maybe low fat, listen to our cholesterol podcast, by the way, if you haven't listened to that one. We talk about where some of the myths of cholesterol, or not even myths, but some of the shady research showing that high cholesterol, blood cholesterol levels were being linked to heart disease. So this was part of it. So this is where the low fat diet craze started to come from. We thought if we ate less fat, if we kept our cholesterol levels down, this would prevent heart disease. This was sort of a big generalization that was drawn from actually some fairly small studies. So one of them was the Ornish study, if anyone's heard of that. So the Ornish diet is actually very, very effective at reducing cholesterol and reducing heart disease. It's a very, very strict low-fat diet. But the initial data that was put out was from, I think it was 10 or 12 people. So to take, anyone who's familiar with research knows you can't take what is good for 10 to 12 people and generalize that to the mass population.
For an entire population.
And that is part of the problem is that, again, we're not saying, do low fat or do low carb. And that's the big problem is that you can't generalize one diet plan to everyone. That is what we like to do in this country. We have the dietary guidelines for Americans, so which again we talk about being for the general population, but when you're talking about you as an individual, you may or may not be the general population. So some people do better with fat, some people do better with carbs. I always say quality, quality, quality first. So I don't care if you're eating more fats or you're eating more carbs. It depends on the quality of those fats and carbs.
So I'm interested because in the Ornish study, do they talk about what specifically they were eating?
Yeah, let me find that.
Well, and while she's looking at that, I'd just like to, back that up and talk about, again, we generalize so much in here in terms of, making a recommendation from a small study. But, when we back it up and take the 30,000 foot view and just really observe, right? We talk about, we did a podcast about, the observation, and, that's what science in its purity is, observing, how different things, how a hypothesis works, within a controlled environment, or, really we can't control our environment when you really look at how humans operate, because there are, millions of functions every second going on at the cellular level. And, one thing can interact that we, maybe looking at, one area of the body, but we're not seeing how it's impacting down the road. And I think that, like you said, with this case of the Ornish study, maybe they saw like, okay, it was decreasing heart disease and cholesterol, but, we didn't see the impact that it was going to say, like, okay, well, let's, take low fat and pass that on to everyone and see what the impacts are going to be.
And the other problem, again, you have to look at the quality. So the Ornish diet it's a very low fat vegetarian diet with less than 10% of calories coming from mainly unsaturated fats. So that's less than a third of the fat on the typical American diet. And this was shown to actually reverse atherosclerosis. So this was the first diet to actually, because we thought, so atherosclerosis, the building up of plaque in the arteries, we thought was a progressive disease, that once you had it, it was there. And this was one of the first studies that showed lifestyle actually could reverse that, which is fantastic. I mean, that's great news. But again, you have to look at the quality of what these people are eating. If you are eating a naturally low-fat diet, meaning a lot of vegetables, a lot of lean proteins, and a lot of, maybe whole grains, then yes, naturally you're eating whole foods, which is what I talk about all the time. So if you're eating naturally low fat, that is different than what we have then taken and created this low fat craze.
Artificial.
Yes. So we've started, putting this low-fat diet on a pedestal, and then unfortunately, which you and I were talking about, means people want to start making money on it.
Yes.
So you see the food industry getting involved with these low-fat products. What I found really interesting when I was looking into this was that the food industry was actually outraged when some of these recommendations started coming out, because originally, we're going to lose, we're going to lose money, and people are going to stop buying the snack foods and stop buying the foods. But then they realize, we can make money on this. Yeah. So all of a sudden you see processed foods replacing fat with what? America's favorite ingredient.
Sugar.
So this is where we started to see, even though low fat started becoming more and more popular, Americans were actually getting fatter and sicker. Yeah. So right there, that should have been an indication that something's not right. And this clearly was not the correct answer to the problem that we were trying to address.
Yeah. So I want to go back to that study one more time again, just, hammer down the idea of quality, because, the Ornish study, as you referenced there, it makes perfect sense in terms of, the word nowadays is plant-based eating, right? A lot of people eat plant-based eating, where they get the majority of their calories from your fruits, mostly vegetables. Again, sometimes lean meats. I know some people, though, have just eliminated meats completely, or they've gone pescatarian, where it's like they'll only eat a little bit of fish with, mostly fruits and vegetables. And again, they're eating foods that you can grow from nature. They come or they're eating, flesh that has been eating food from nature. So that's how our bodies were designed to eat foods. And if you look at the majority of those foods, very rarely is it all carbohydrate or all fat or all protein. Usually it's a combination. You look at animal flesh. You've got a great combination of very high protein, but also very good fat. Mm-hmm. And especially if those animals were eating largely diets of, grass that mm-hmm. they were designed to eat, then that fat is going to be very healthy for you, and your body craves it in many ways. So if you look at that Ornish study, plant-based eating, I think, has been proven time and time again to kind of reverse that process of, atherosclerosis, like you mentioned. And it's very interesting because, well, I always tell this when I look at x-rays on individuals. I can always see these areas where their bone is reshaping and they're having this degenerative process in their spine, maybe from an old injury. And they start to ask me, well, can that be reversed, or how long? It takes 10 to 20 years, 1 to 2 decades for an x-ray to actually show a visual change that you can see a bone change shape or calcium deposits show up. And so it's the same thing, in your arteries. It's like it's going to take 1 to 2 decades for that or atherosclerosis, which are, again, deposits of plaque and calcium, and that buildup. It's going to take 1 to 2 decades for that to show up. So it can be reversed because as I always say, calcium's laid down where there's areas of stress in the body. But if you get to the underlying cause of what is leading to that stress and remove it, well, the body laid it down. It's intelligent enough to reverse it and pull it back up. And so that's obviously what that study that you referenced has shown. And in the same respect, in so many cases, when we get to the underlying cause of what is leading to the stress in the body and we help to eliminate that or manage it better, then you start to reverse these chronic conditions that we think are killers in our society. And again, unfortunately, heart disease and cancer are still at the top of our list in the United States as number one, killers. Followed closely by prescribed medication is unfortunately up there, and then you go down the list of chronic diseases. Diabetes and complications of diabetes is coming up that list very, very fast. And again, it goes back to the high sugar intake was replaced with low fat, low carbohydrate. So we did this big circle here of like what is natural, what is artificial.
And I think that's a good point back to the when we take fat out and we replace it with sugar, and it's important to talk about why, and that actually comes back to one of my other bullet points that I wanted to touch on, which is
I knew that.
This, of course, yeah. See, it was all planned. We clearly rehearsed these. So the idea is, fat is naturally very, very flavorful. Anyone who's ever had, a nice thick cut of steak or
ribeye,
that fat is flavorful. Even think of an avocado, which is a very high fatty food versus a piece of broccoli. I mean, I personally like broccoli, but again, that avocado just has a flavor to it that you're not going to get in some of those naturally low fat products. Yeah. So when you take fat out, you have to put something in to make it taste good. If food companies marketed low-fat products that didn't have sugar in them, they would taste like cardboard. I mean, truly. So that is where the replacement started coming from. But unfortunately, again, we took out one ingredient that's natural, that our body actually can use and process in a different way, because fat also takes longer to digest and break down. So it leaves you feeling full for longer versus sugar, which I forget which podcast, I know we've talked about this. We know we talk about sugar in every one, but sugar is burned very, very quickly. So again, it's not saying that it's bad all the time, but it's not necessarily something you want to be eating all day, every day when you're the average American that is just sitting and not burning and not using that sugar. So with that being said, that was the other thing I found interesting. So I found a couple systematic reviews that just compiled some of the research on low fat versus low carb. And the one found not only was the low carb group, so low carb, not the general way to go with the low fats. The low carb group had better outcomes for their weight, their HDL, which is good. That's helpful and preventative for heart disease.
So HDL was going up.
Triglycerides went down, which is good, and actually had improvements in their systolic blood pressure. But what was also interesting is that there was higher attrition in the low-fat group. So attrition in research means basically drop-off. So people that don't finish the research for whatever reason, don't stick with the program. So in the low-fat group, people weren't sticking with the diet because it's not as tasteful. It's not as
difficult.
It's not as sustainable. Yeah. So that's the other important thing to think about, because when we talk about, what diet plan's right for you or what exercise plan's right for you, what I always tell everybody is it's the one that you're going to stick with, and it's the one that's going to make your body feel good and give you the energy that you need to do the things that you want to do. So the Ornish diet may be very, very effective, but it is a very difficult diet plan to follow. Again, those people in that study were in a very controlled setting. They've repeated it over the years, and it tends to be successful, but it is also not something, you have to be very, very committed to stay on that type of diet plan forever. So that's the other thing to keep in mind is, food is fuel. Food, can have positive or negative effects on our body, but at the end of the day, you have to like what you're eating, and you have to have that balance, because if it's not something that's enjoyable or sustainable, you're not gonna stick with it at the end of the day.
Yeah, and so I think it's very important to follow up on that point here. The importance of cycling through different diets too. If someone is really dedicated to, they want to lose weight or they want to reverse some serious metabolic diseases, like heart disease, like diabetes. I get so frustrated when I see individuals come in anymore and they talk about their diabetes, and it's like, did you have a conversation with your endocrinologist? And I ask them straight up, was there ever a conversation about you being able to change certain things to reduce or come off of medication? Or every time you go in, is it the discussion only, well, we have to maintain or increase medication? Because if that's the conversation, then they're not getting to the root cause of the issue. And so if you have eaten, low fat, high carbohydrate for a long period of time, then it might be necessary to swing to the opposite side of the pendulum for a while, where you're eating very low carbohydrate. And I think, that study that you referenced, I could almost guarantee that many of those, participants probably were eating very high sugar. So going from a high sugar diet to a very low carbohydrate, no processed sugar diet, and you're only getting your sugars from, maybe a little bit of fruit and mostly vegetables. Your body, it's not that it's one diet versus the other, but it's in that transition of the pendulum swing that your body makes those amazing adaptations. And that's why you can hear men and women, but especially men, they come into the office and say, Dr. Dan, I've lost 12 pounds in the last couple weeks. And it's like, well, what'd you do? I cut out carbs. It's like, surprise!
Yeah. I stopped eating those snack bars.
Yeah.
that was the one. The one patient that was the one suggestion I gave. Overall, eating pretty clean, but he was doing these
healthy snack bars. Air quotes.
Some kind of like protein bar, snack bar, or something that was processed. And it's like, you know what? Everything else you said sounds pretty good. Cut those out. Let us know. And next time he comes back, I think he comes about once a month or whatever. Yeah. He was like, he was down. He's like,
10 pounds.
Down 10 pounds, and he'd been completely stagnant in his weight for years. Yeah. And he's like, how?
So it's the changing. So sometimes we get so stuck on like, well, do I eat this way or do I eat this way? And a lot of times it's the variation or the cycling, the change, the adaptation of the diet. There's books out there about, eating with the seasons, and discussing
cyclical eating.
Cyclical eating. You're literally eating, what would be normal and natural natural for a population. You're literally eating what would be in season.
Yeah,
so
paleo is very big on that. So with paleo, it's a lot of plants, lean protein, no grains, no legumes, and the fruit is in moderation, and the fruit should only be seasonal. And they're very, whatever is seasonal and local. So that's, it's a big thing, because again, it comes back to that ancestral type eating where our body, like that's, if you look at people across the world, we obviously look very different body types, very different eating patterns, and so there is something to the genetics is starting to become more, people are starting to look into their ancestry and look into their blood type and look into these different things, and there's we have the right idea. I don't think we have all the answers yet, but we do have the right idea that, again, that's why when you could talk to 5 friends and what works for one doesn't work for the other, doesn't work for the other, even within a family. It's what works for you always joke at me with I'll eat something, you're like, how do you? I was like, well, I don't know, I'm gonna go burn it. Like that's, and it's just so there it is. There's a lot of factors that go into how we burn, and that's where kind of getting back to that ancestral type eating can be very, very helpful. Well,
and it's not just, and again, genetics versus epigenetics too, because it's it also is the environment. So in addition, we talk about cyclical or seasonal eating, you have to look at latitudes and where, your ancestors were coming from. So you can look at a study, the Inuit population in the very northern parts of Canada and up around the Arctic areas of the world, where they're on ice for half of the year. Their diet, 70% plus blubber, fat, 70% fat. And they did studies on these individuals, and they had next to zero incident of heart disease. No arteriosclerosis. There was no, fat. There was no, buildup of plaque in their arteries. And they ate 70% of their diet was fat. Now, we have to look at that and say, well, wait a minute here. Obviously they're eating, again, a very high fat diet. But then they also did a study where they, took natives from, I believe it was Australia. And, again, very fit individuals, they don't have chairs. They literally live off the land. They took those same individuals, put them and fed them the American diet, the standard American diet, as we always talk about. High carbohydrate, low fat, lots of processed stuff. Within months, these individuals they gained a ton of weight, and they started showing signs of degenerative processes in their body. Well, and then I think they took those same individuals, put them back in their native environment, and again, it reversed almost immediately. So we have to look at not just, our genetics, but also where are we placing our genetics? Because if you took, someone from that Arctic Circle and then put them in Florida, certainly in the Arctic Circle, if you eat citrus and your body is extremely cold, citrus cools the body down. So if your body is already functioning at a cooler state because that's the natural environment that you're in, and then you eat citrus will actually start to, break down in a very negative way in your body. We take that same person and put them in an environment where it's, 80 to 90 degrees and very humid, eating that same citrus literally works for their body to break it down. So we also have to look at that in terms of, well, where are you living, and maybe where did your ancestors live? So it's not just your genetics, but where did your ancestors live, and where are you living currently? That may make a big difference. So.
We're starting to see a big issue with the American diet finding its way into a lot of these other cultures, unfortunately. So I always like to talk about the Samoan population. So the Samoans are, again, their genetics are to put on mass. That's what, anyone who knows the Samoans, so Dwayne Johnson, that picture, that they're literally godlike figures.
Yeah.
They are big, they are tall, they are strong, and that is their genetics. But if your genetics are to put on mass, and then you replace a very healthy, very natural
Protein,
diet
fat.
with the American diet, which is what has now infiltrated their culture, we are seeing massive obesity, a massive health crisis there, because that is, unfortunately, people look to the American diet as if I have money, that's what I eat. That's a sign of wealth, is to be able to afford the Coca-Cola and the Spam and the Doritos and the processed foods. That's a sign of wealth there. Meanwhile, they have fruit hanging from the tree. They're like, oh no, that's peasant food. You don't eat. So it's just this, unfortunately, it's not just affecting us here. This idea of the American diet being this sign of wealth and this sign of whatever it is to other cultures, it's affecting them because of their genetics. So their genetics are to put on mass. They've changed the quality of the food going in. They're still putting on mass. Yeah. They're just putting it on in a very different way.
Around their organs, around their bellies.
And unfortunately, and that's where, again, you'll see certain people. We talk about this all the time. You see the people that can put away, eat whatever they want, don't gain a pound, or they change up one thing and they lose 10 pounds like that. And then you have the people like me that, smell a French fry and I put on 5 pounds. And it's just, so you see this, you see this variation, and that's where it's really important. So, we talk about all the time, getting in tune with your body, listening to your body. Your body's going to tell you when you're eating the right things. I tell people this all the time. Your body is going to tell you if, oh yeah, I'm feeling good. I have energy. My weight's, stable. I'm not feeling bloated. Or it's going to tell you, nope, you're not eating the right things if you're feeling lethargic, sluggish, headaches, gut issues. So it's just a matter of listening to that, working with someone. If you don't know, if some of the stuff we're talking about, fats, carbs, macros, if you're all sitting there going, what the heck is this? That's when you work with someone who knows what that is, because you do, unfortunately. And again, now you're seeing all these diet plans out there. Oh my gosh, it's driving me nuts, where they're, take this quiz and we'll tell you the exact macro breakdown. It's like, well, how is a 5-minute quiz supposed to tell you what your, what your macro breakdown's supposed to be? I had an entire class on that in my master's. I mean, it's a very complex process to determine, especially for athletes, exactly what that macro breakdown should be.
Well, and again, to follow up on that, the same conversation we just had about genetics versus the epigenetics of where are your genetics in the environment, because there are now companies out there that are talking about, well, we can do a genetic test and tell you exactly what you're supposed to eat, and they're looking at it again from a sales, follow the money, from a sales perspective of what type of supplements can we recommend you, and maybe we can even customize a specific supplement cocktail to your genetic makeup. But then again, you take the same genetics, like the Samoans you just talked about, or the Aboriginals from Australia, or the the Inuits up in the Arctic Circle, and you put them in different environments, and your genes change based on the environment that you're in. And it's not that your genes change, the expression, what genes get turned on and off, and how you're processing all the biochemical reactions at the cellular level get changed when you change the environment that you put it in. So, you can read the recipe book, your genes, you can read that, but depending on the environment that you put that in, it may change the expression of what that, how it's going to look. So that is very, very important, especially when you're working at trying to get healthy or trying to reverse a disease process, but going back to, and again, we don't have to think of like, I got to find the perfect diet for me and stay there. It's sometimes not about that. It's about finding what is the right diet at the right time in your life. I found fasting, 3 years ago, back in 2019, I really started researching it. I dove into it, very hard. I started off with a 5-day water fast. When someone first told me about it, I'm like, I'm going to give this a try. I've never gone without a couple hours without food. It's like, again, we grew up, it's like, eat right before you work out and then eat after, because then your body is, in this anabolic state and you're going to gain muscle and feed that muscle.
Yeah, protein shake after.
Yeah, protein shake before and after, and 5 protein shakes throughout the day. It's just like, and you look back on it and it's like, holy cow, was I wrong? But, so I was like, well, let me give this a shot. I'm going to self-experiment, observation. I'm going to see how this impacts myself, And again, these are people and experts that I trust. So I'm going to give it a shot. I did this 5-day water fast. First day or two, I definitely had some withdrawal symptoms and headaches. But it's like by the time I got to the, day 3, 4, it was like, wow, does my body feel different? And the mental acuity that came from that. And so I took that, I did that in June. Fast forward a couple months, and then I really got into experimenting with the ketogenic diet. And again, that's high fat, very low carbohydrate. You're talking less than 10% of your calories are coming from carbohydrates. And that includes even, good, healthy, quality carbohydrates like fruits. You're really, really limiting that. Very high fat, probably over 50% of your calories coming from fat. And then again, less than 50% of your protein. But the problem with the ketogenic diet is many people they're going from a high carb, and then again, it's all about swinging to the opposite side of the pendulum where now they just start eating more fat. But their body is in a diseased state. So to reverse that diseased state, it's not just about what you're eating, but when you are eating it. And so we'll do a whole discussion and podcast on fasting. But what I found was doing the ketogenic diet, and eating that very high fat, low carbohydrate, I was also cycling when I was eating. So I would do literally once a week, I would do a 2-day fast, and I would repeat that once a week. So the most weight that I had ever dropped in my life, I dropped 28 pounds in 30 days by cycling the type of fasting and cycling through the ketogenic diet. So again, I am not promoting this. And I would not promote this long term, because what experts have come to understand is that is not healthy long term, when you're looking at it. And again, you can speak to, I know you did some longer term fasts. You talk about fasting around, your menstrual cycle and how, pardon I'm not allowed to say the S word. Apparently my wife told me. But anyway, how crappy that makes you feel, and this is stuff that we have all figured out. Again, we cycle through different phases, especially women go through major hormonal changes throughout the month. So
yeah, women especially. And that's, we'll talk about that more in the fasting, but even when we're talking about you're talking about the diet and changing up your diet, women, throughout the month, you probably notice when you're craving certain things, that you crave more carbohydrates around your cycle. Now, of course, we eat the wrong kind, we crave the sugar, but there's a reason that you're actually craving those carbohydrates, that your body actually needs more of that in the event that you actually were to have a pregnancy and try to bring that pregnancy to term. That takes a lot of that carbohydrate. That's why you're craving that. So understanding that, especially if it's somebody like me who's training for a specific event right now, I have to change up how I eat, how I train. I have to be aware of it. I can't change everything, but at least if I'm aware and my trainer's aware, we can kind of understand, I'm sluggish this day, I didn't have enough carbs. I need to make sure I'm upping the carbs around that time so that I can get through my training, so that I can get through, I can't, again, so fun being a woman sometimes, but I can't change that.
It is
but
wonderful.
If you can understand it, and again, listen to your body and understand how that's going to change and affect sort of the breakdown of what you need day to day. And especially with fasting, a lot of women, again, all of the studies out there on fasting and intermittent fasting are men. So actually most research in general out there is in men. Women, we are very, very difficult to study because of the hormonal shifts. If you wanted to do a true study with women, you would almost need to get, ideally you would need to get women who are on the exact same cycle, and it's impossible. So you'll see a lot more research in men, but then unfortunately what they do is they take that and then
extrapolate to women.
Yes, and they say, look how great fasting is. Here, go do it. And some women have really great success. Some women I started having a lot of issues with my cycle. So I had to kind of back off from it and change up how I do it. So now I do more, I'll do a 1 or 2 day fast, kind of probably more quarterly, is just sort of I'll do it as a cleanup, just sort of, I'm feeling run down. It actually helps.
Had a couple French fries.
Yeah, a little maybe you had a little too much fun on vacation kind of thing, and but yeah, so it's really just interesting. That's why I always talk about the intuitive, just being intuitive with your body, the intuitive eating. People ask me all the time, like, oh, well, what's your diet? What diet are you following? I was like, I just...
Depends on the day.
Yeah, I was like, honestly, I do. And right now, because of what I'm doing, I'm tracking what I'm eating, and I'm looking at what weeks seem to be better versus other weeks. But, at the end of the day, it's, people want to know, should I do this or should I do that? And it's really going to come down to, what are your goals? Are you healthy and trying to maintain? Are you in a disease state, like Dr. Dan was saying, and you're trying to reverse that? Are you an athlete training for something specific? There are so many factors involved in what is quote unquote the right diet for you, and there is no one right diet for everyone. But at the end of the day, like I always said, it's going to come down to the quality. If you're putting crap in your body, you're going to feel like crap. That's, we talk about the fuel in the car all the time. If you're putting sludge in your car, it's not.
Well, yeah, and if you put diesel fuel in a high performance car, it's not going to perform very well. But if you put that same diesel fuel in a truck, it can perform for tens of
just like there's
hundreds of hours.
Yeah, that's just like there's different types of fuel for our vehicles. There's different types of fuels that are going to be right for different people in different circumstances. So it really is about finding what's right for you. And I know that's this is the time where we normally tell people it's like, okay, we've been talking about all this. What's the answer?
What do we do?
And now the answer is the answer is you got to find what works for you.
Well, and I think some of the keys that you were talking about, the signals, and I talk about this in just the book that I wrote for our office, specifically about what we do, designed to heal. It comes down to listening, like you just said, listening to your body signals. If you're waking up with headaches every day, there's a reason, and we have to get to the underlying cause of why that is. Most of us, we listen to our body signals, and then we want to cover them up. And again, it's no no shame or guilt. That's the system that we were taught. If you've got reflux, and you've got burning in your in your esophagus and heartburn, here's a medication to cover that up. Don't change anything about your lifestyle. Pull right up, keep eating the chili fries and the donuts and everything, and and then here's this medication that you can quiet down the burning sensation in your heart. And it's like, no, wait a minute. Why don't we
Something's causing that.
Something's causing that. It's a signal that your body is dysfunctional. What we do in the office a lot of times is just help individuals figure out, what are the cues? What are you feeling? And help them own those signals, and then get to the underlying cause of what is, flaring, what it's causing those signals to go off, the alarms to go off, rather than just covering them up. We talk about that in the book. It's like you wouldn't want to go to a car mechanic, when your check engine light is on, and then he goes in and just puts a piece of tape over the the check engine light, brings it back out, and it's like, all right, you're good to go. It's like, now wait a minute, you just covered up the signal, you didn't fix the problem. And that's what our whole, unfortunately, the majority of our healthcare system is around: cover up the alarm, cover up the signal, rather than get to the underlying cause of why it's there. So, just some tips about, the high carb versus the high fat. Again, I think if you're in a disease state, I will always be a proponent of, if you are suffering like, severe diabetes, or you're borderline diabetes, or you've got some significant weight that you want to lose, or you've got heart disease, in your history, I will always be a proponent of, fasting and, timeline-based eating as a major tool that you can use to help reverse that disease state. Again, you've been, probably eating for 1 to 2 decades, dysfunctionally. So it's not just about what you're eating, but it's when, and we've got to really swing the pendulum in the opposite direction to not just what you're eating, but you're not eating certain times of the day. And I know that sounds scary to some people, but again, when you break it down, if you're diagnosed with cancer, you're going to listen to your oncologist, or at least the majority of people, like, you're going to go to your oncologist and you're going to do whatever they say they're going to do. Well, we're talking about signals that could lead to serious disease, or maybe you're transitioning into a serious disease state. There are tools out there that can reverse that disease state. So I will always be a proponent of, a fasting-based lifestyle, especially if you're trying to prevent severe illness. Now, I know, Angela, you're coming at it more from an athlete standpoint. That you need those carbohydrates if you are training very, very hard, and you're out there, you're performing, probably training 2 times a day. You're always going to be a proponent of that higher carbohydrate and higher protein, and probably more of a Paleolithic style diet. So again,
when I'm talking about when I need carbs, I'm not going and eating chips and pretzels, and I'm talking
cereal.
I'm talking sweet potatoes. Yeah. I'm talking quinoa. I'm talking brown rice. I'm talking even white rice when I really need to, but it's
risotto.
Yeah. But I'm talking again natural carbs, not because that's the other issue too to remember is when we're talking low fat, low carb. I don't care what you follow. Cutting out the processed food is just going to be key across the board, because that's just, we listen to our one on inflammation. We talk a lot about that. And at the end of the day, it's like if you have a diet high in processed foods, I don't care what your macro breakdown is, you're not going to be healthy.
Correct.
You're just not going to be healthy. And it's just the unfortunate reality that we live in a convenience-based world where we have all of these very unhealthy things so easily available. We talk about all the time. It's so simple, but it's not easy to follow a healthy lifestyle. It's so simple, but it's not easy. It's about being mindful. It's about making the right choices. And again, it's not to say you can never have the cookie. It's not to say you can never have the French fries. It's about understanding on a regular basis, making those healthy choices, finding what works for you and your body, so that you can enjoy. That's what we always talk about. So you can enjoy the other times without completely throwing your body out of whack.
Well, and that's a major key too, because if you take someone who has been eating a very toxic diet for years, or decades, and then they start to get a little bit healthier, well, it could take years to reverse the damage. But let's say someone goes a little bit healthier. I can think of one person off the top of my head who they've been doing really good with eliminating sugar from the beginning of the year in a couple months, and then they went and traveled and visited a friend, and everything that she had going on flared up.
Yep.
And it was and it lasted, for a couple weeks in terms of her flare up. So now you and I, who keep our bodies in relatively healthy condition, we can have a couple cookies and, our body is going to take care of it, burn it off. I might have a headache the next day, but our body is going to take care of it and flush it out and be back on track very quickly. So that, again, that's the difference of the genetics and the system and the time that you are in. If your body has been diseased for many, many years and, you start eating cleanly and then go back to junk food, your body is going to let you know. Yeah. It's going to signal you that it is inflamed. It is not a good thing. But if you got someone who's functioning very, very healthfully, I'll never forget, you referenced The Rock. I'll never forget, I think he was on the Jimmy Fallon show or one of the night talk shows, and someone brought up the fact that he had never had a Sour Patch Kid or a Swedish Fish or something, because the man doesn't eat garbage. Yeah. And so they brought it out and they're like, would you eat this? And he was I think he was looking at him real hesitant. He finally, he ate it, just to be funny. But again, it's his body's going to burn that off in a blink of a second because he never eats it. So, that's when your body is a very finely tuned, healthy machine, which we are all designed to be. You can celebrate those occasions, not not weeks on end.
Yes, exactly. So, that's quality always has to be first. And like we always say, take care of your body. It'll take care of you.
It'll take care of you. So again, fat versus carbs, at the end of the day, if any of this resonated with you, or if you are in that disease state, or feel like you have family members that are headed that way and you don't want to go that direction, maybe you're, in the middle of your lifespan and you're seeing your parents, go down a very sick path that you don't want to follow. follow. There is hope. You are not doomed by your genes. There is hope that you can get healthy and stay healthy, or, if you are healthy, stay that way, for the rest of your life. We're all designed to healthy. We're all designed to live well into our 90s and 100s and beyond, if we have the right environment, the right tools. So again, at the end of the day, it might not be fat versus carbs, but, just finding what is right for you at the time. So if any of this resonated with you and you need help discussing that, that's what we do. So if you're in the southwestern Pennsylvania region, we'd love to reach out to you, or we'd love to have you reach out to us directly. If you are somewhere else listening anywhere in the world and you need to find someone, we have contacts all over the place. Or again, in today's day and age, we can help you discuss and consult, online or anywhere else. So, if any of this resonated with you, do not hesitate to reach out on our website, Turo, Turo, familychiropractic.com. And again, this podcast will be on there, and, check out some of our other podcasts. And we thank you so much for stopping by.
Yes, thank you guys. We will see you next time.
You've been listening to What the Health with Dr. Dan and Angela Toro, brought to you by Toro Family Chiropractic. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.whatthehealth.world.